So let's talk about hope. The topic of having a narcissistic parent can often leave us feeling, again, defeated, exhausted, and at times hopeless. And interestingly, I've observed personally, and those people I've helped around this issue are some of the nicest, strongest, dynamic, empathetic people, honestly, I've ever met. And I realized, like, it feels like there's a paradox here, because it's interesting how these people have often been told the opposite of that, but yet that's how they're perceived publicly. So the way that they're perceived publicly is so different from how they were being perceived by their parent. And I talk about this, that a lot of times, at least for me growing up, I was told I was selfish, I was bad. And again, that wasn't all the time, but there are things that stick with me. And that wasn't what I was getting from like my teachers, other people in my environment. So it just creates this internal confusion about who am I? What kind of a person am I? And in that key moment growing up where you're trying to form your sense of identity, it can be really confusing. And like, as a result, I think looking back now, it's why at high school I was like, so like, I gotta get out of here. Like, I didn't know why, but I wanted to leave and go far away. And again, disclaimer, once again, not calling my parents bad people, I'm not vilifying them, but I do think that, this is something that shaped who I am. And I think it's just food for thought to think about within yourself, about the paradox, about how they perceived you versus how other people perceive you. So I realized, I'm like, how do I get to hope with all this? But what I want to say is, I think that in this recovery process, one of the cool things is, because there's been that internal confusion that's happened a lot of times, you're forced to define yourself. You're forced to come up with, who am I? Because you have to let go of this negative identity, this negative sort of like, shed that sort of skin of how they defined you. And it's actually kind of hopeful, and it actually kind of makes you feel very happy and satisfied. But I think a lot of people, I notice, haven't actually been through something like this, and as a result haven't defined themselves so intentionally. So I think there's a lot of hope here that through these pain points with growing up with a narcissistic, with a borderline parent, with a mentally ill parent, whatever it might be, that actually having to really name who you are, like that I am good, I am dynamic, I am creative, that, there may be times that I could get angry or sad, but that all those emotions are also a rich part of the human experience, can be a really hopeful thing. So just food for thought. And I'm definitely not implying that if you've gone through narcissistic abuse or childhood trauma, that we are happy about that. But I think a lot of what can help in the recovery process, at least for me, is naming how it actually propelled me forward. Because I think for a lot of the time I was very stuck in the sadness, and I'll definitely talk about sadness because waves of sadness still do arise. But I also want to give even time to how it's been positive, how it's been good, and how it's moved me forward. So thank you.